Okay, there we go. All right, today we are going to be talking about the structure of a counterplan. We're going to be talking about the state's counterplan that many of you are going to be using in the 2020-2021 season. So I'm going to get right into it because this video is going to be a little bit long, but it's not going to be, I don't think the concepts are difficult. We're just going to go through it and explain a lot. So when it comes to a counterplan, the structure is these three main parts: the counterplan text, the solvency, and the net benefit. And then additionally, we generally have one other part, which is called an answer to the permutation, perm answer. We'll get into all these parts as we go through the video, so just sit back and relax. The first part is the counterplan text. So the counterplan text is the actual text of what the counterplan does. It's what you're asking the judge to do at the end of the debate, right? Like just how the 1AC has a plan text where they ask the judge to pass a particular law or do something. The negative has a counterplan text that does the same thing. It tells the judge specifically what the negative wants them to do, right? And what you're asking the judge to pass. So for example, on this year's topic about criminal justice reform, the counterplan text is that each of the 50 states should pass a law banning all non-tactical police from carrying or using firearms while on duty. So you'll notice that that's basically the exact same as the plan text from the 1AC, except that instead of the US federal government doing it, it's the 50 states doing it, right? So the negative is basically agreeing, police shouldn't have guns for the most part. But what they're disagreeing about is who should do the plan. Should it be the national government or should it be the state governments? And the negative is going to say having the national government do it is a bad idea. Having the state governments do it is a good idea. So sometimes it's not about what you're doing, but who's about who's doing it, right? So for our Taco Bell example that we talked about before, with the 1AC is to go to dinner at Taco Bell because you want to get dinner, right? A good counterplan of those four that we talked about was the counterplan to make dinner at home instead of going to Taco Bell, right? So it solves the advantages outlined by the plan, and also you can say that it actually does what the plan wants to do, but better. We'll talk more about that. So the next part after the text is the solvency, and the counterplan solvency is basically the same as the affirmative solvency, right? The affirmative solvency says why the affirmative plan text would solve the problem that they outline. The negative solvency says how the counterplan would solve the problems outlined by the 1AC. So it's a very similar concept, but the counterplan solvency says how the counterplan solves the problem, right? Which makes sense. You want to be able to say that if you have this counterplan, it actually solves the problems laid out by the 1AC. So here's an example. On this year's topic, we're saying that the 50 states should pass the criminal justice reform, right? They should take away guns from the police. So that evidence is going to say that the counterplan solves the police legitimacy and the police violence arguments by making some claims that say that the states can solve that problem really well, right? So they might look at historical examples. They might say things like, states are closer to their voters. They respond more effectively, more quickly. They could say that state governments are more legitimate than the national government, so they can make things happen better, or that the states have experience doing criminal justice reform or regulating the police. So therefore, if they have experience, they know how to do it the right way, right? So all these things are saying that if the states were to pass the plan to take away guns from police officers, they would be able to solve the problem better, more quickly, more likely than the affirmative does, right? So they solve it better, they have better solvency. Same thing is true with the Taco Bell example. If you're going to say that, instead of going to Taco Bell, we should stay at home and cook, what you could say is that cooking at home is cheaper and healthier than going out to Taco Bell, right? You have more options. It's going into your food, like less preservatives, less toxic stuff, whatever like that. Who's preparing your food. You have more control over what's bought and used in your food. So, it's like high quality ingredients, nutritious ingredients, instead of, whatever's going to be at a fast food restaurant. Okay, the third part you need for your structure to the counterplan is the net benefit. So a net benefit, this is where we're adding something new, right? the counterplan text and the solvency is something we had before. Net benefit is a totally new concept. So net benefit is something that the counterplan does that the affirmative doesn't. So that's either a positive thing that the counterplan creates that the affirmative plan doesn't, or it's a negative thing, a harmful thing, a bad thing that the counterplan avoids that the 1AC, the affirmative plan, doesn't, right? So we call it a net benefit because when you think about, when you're totaling up numbers or things in your head, you think about things in net, right? Like in total on balance. You can also think of it as like a visual metaphor. Like if you have a net and you throw it out, you want to get more fish, more good stuff when you come back, right? The benefit. So what is the net benefit of the counterplan? Are you creating positive things that the plan doesn't create? Or are you avoiding negative things that the plan causes? Either one is fine. And we'll talk about both when we talk through more on the evidence, I think. We'll talk a little bit about here, but we'll talk more on evidence and strategy. So for example, for the net benefit, when we talk about this year's topic about the state's counterplan, one thing that it does better is that you can say it solves more or it solves better than the affirmative. If the states were to regulate the police instead of the national government regulating police, they would do a better job, is basically what you'd be saying. And you can go back to the arguments we made before, that we looked at before, and we're going to look at more arguments when we get into the evidence about how that's could be the case. The counterplan this year also avoids the state power disadvantage while the affirmative causes it, right? Because the counterplan is saying the states should do the regulation, not the national government. So if the states are doing it, they're not creating an imbalance between the national government and state governments because the state governments are already the ones who do this. So they keep the state power exactly where it is right now, whereas the affirmative might take away power from the states and give it to the national government. And through the state power disadvantage, you say that's a bad thing, right? So the state's counterplan can avoid that negative disadvantage, whereas the affirmative cannot, as of the 1NC, they can't avoid it, right? Later on, the affirmative can make arguments that they do avoid it or they don't cause it, or maybe it's a good thing if they do cause it, but just on a basic strategy level, that's how it breaks down. In the Taco Bell example, think about it this way. So it creates more positives to stay at home and cook rather than go to Taco Bell because it solves more, right? It's cheaper and it's healthier than going to Taco Bell. Additionally, if you remember the disadvantage we talked about in the last set of videos, a potential disadvantage of going to Taco Bell would be if you have to drive there, it increases your likelihood of getting into a car accident or something else like that really bad happening, right? So guess what? If you cook at home, you are not driving anywhere, so you don't cause that risk of having a car accident, right? So the counterplan of staying home to cook seems like it should solve the problem outlined by the 1AC better, and also it doesn't cause the disadvantage of potentially getting into a car accident, whereas the affirmative does, right? So the Taco Bell example is really nice because it shows us that the counterplan both solves better and also avoids the disadvantage, just like our counterplan this year for the actual topic does. So the next part we have is permutation. So a permutation is basically just a fancy way of saying another way of doing something, right? It comes from mathematics. So a permutation in debate is basically saying when the affirmative says, okay, we have our plan, and then there's this counter plan, but judge, you can do them both at the same time, right? So it's not saying like, oh, the affirmative is chocolate, the negative is peanut butter, which one's better? It's the affirmative can be like, no, we have a permutation. Like they're both great flavors and they go great together. So the judge should do them both at the same time. And the permutation tries to show the judge that if both the plan and counterplan can be done together, then there's no reason to vote negative for the counterplan over the affirmative plan, right? The negative has to prove that the affirmative is a bad idea or that they have a better idea, but they don't prove that the affirmative is a bad idea through the counterplan. They don't prove that the counterplan is a better idea if you can have a permutation as the affirmative, right? So let's think of, like, not related to this topic, not related to the examples we talked about before, just a more extreme example of a permutation. So let's say the 1AC plan is that Congress should pass a law providing health care for everyone in the United States. If you're the 1AC, you're going to say it's a great thing. You know, people get health care, they get all this treatment, they're going to be a lot healthier, happier, there's going to be less stress. It's not going to be tied to their jobs, or they're not going to be uninsured. Like, it's going to be great for them, whatever, right? Let's say the negative in the 1AC comes up and says that their counter plan is that the US Congress should pass a law removing our troops from Iraq and Afghanistan, ending the wars there, right? Okay. And they're going to say that's a great idea because, like, you know, when we're there, it's imperialist and people are dying. It's all very bad, right? We shouldn't be there, right? So the 1AC plan and the 1NC counter plan are maybe both good ideas, but there's no reason you can't do them both, right? So in the 2AC, the affirmative would just stand up and be like, okay, judge, you should still pass this law providing healthcare, and you should do a permutation where we should also remove our troops from Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, it's not complicated, right? So this is a good example because it's actually almost more confusing because there's no reason you can't do both these at the same time. When we were talking about the other plans, like with Taco Bell, you either go to Taco Bell or you eat out, right? Or sorry, you go to Taco Bell or you eat in, you cook at your house, right? You wouldn't normally do both those things. They seem like they're in conflict with each other. Or with the case we have this year, the national government takes away guns from cops, or the state governments take away guns from cops. There's no reason that you have to do both, right? You shouldn't do both. You can do one or the other. So this example shows that when you have a counter plan, you want something that can't be done at the same time as the plan. You want them in tension, right? Okay, here's some permutation examples for the actual examples we talked about already. So for the Taco Bell example, if we're saying, you know, affirmative says go Taco Bell, negative says nope, stay home and cook. What you could do is say you could do both, right? You could go Taco Bell and also cook at home. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. I don't think that that's a very good permutation because it doesn't really gain the benefits of either, and presumably it would cost more to do both. But that is a possibility, right? You could just do both of them. Another permutation you could have would be to cook at home and also order from Taco Bell. So you cook maybe some parts at home, like maybe the side salad, whatever, and then you order like the entrees, tacos, whatever from Taco Bell. This one kind of makes more sense, right? Still doesn't make that much sense, but at least it's trying to solve parts of the affirmative and bring together the 1AC plan and the 1NC counter plan to make them both doable at the same time. Here's another permutation, is to cook at home today and go to Taco Bell tomorrow. That makes sense, right? If we're already going to cook at home today, then we may as well just cook here and get all the benefits of doing that. And then tomorrow, we're going to go to Taco Bell so that we can get the benefits of both plans, right? So this is a really good permutation because you get the benefits of both plans and you don't get any of the negatives. Unfortunately, this is cheating. I don't want to get too deep here, but this is what we call a time frame perm, right? To do something today and something tomorrow so that we avoid the negative parts. And then the last permutation we have is to cook at home today and order Taco Bell tomorrow, right? So it's just another variation that gets us what we want. Nice thing about this one over the third one is that if you order from Taco Bell, you don't put yourself at risk of the disad, right? Of the getting in car accident disad. Put someone else at that risk, but they might have already had that risk. If they're a delivery person, they're probably delivering anyway. So I don't know, you would have to hash that out in your debate. There's some good answers to it, right? But basically that's the point of these disads, right? Of these permutations, is to say we can do the affirmative plan and we can do the negative counter plan at the same time and still get the benefits of both. So therefore, there's no reason not to do the affirmative today, right? You notice from these two good permutations that you're still going to Taco Bell at some point, right? Whether it's today or tomorrow, you still get to go to Taco Bell. So you're doing the affirmative plan of going to Taco Bell. You're just doing it at a different time. And I'm sure you've thought of your own permutations that would solve this problem. When you're in real life arguments with people, like with peers or with your parents or coach, you probably have a bunch of different options that you give them. Like, I don't want to do homework now. I'll do it later and watch my TV show now or whatever, right? Or play a game with my friends now or whatever. I can do homework whenever. You're basically making a permutation, right? You're just saying, I will do what you want me to do, but I will also do this thing I want to do, and there's a way to reconcile that. And you can basically have endless permutations. So permutations are really, really powerful. And if we let all the coaches and students, debaters just make up their own permutations, you would stumble onto some that are really, really strong and really good. So that's why we have a set permutation in the packet to make it a little more fair between the affirmative and the negative, one that isn't so powerful that the affirmative wins every time, but also not so bad that the negative wins every time. And speaking of permutation examples for this year's topic, we'll get into that in the next two videos, especially under the evidence video, so that we can see how that goes. So this video is pretty long, but I hope you understand that once you start running the counterplan, you have the option to tell a totally different story than what you've been telling in other debates. But you just need to make sure that you have your counterplan text, your counterplan solvency, your net benefit, and then be ready to answer the permutation. Okay. And if you want to know more about that, check out the next evidence video. We're going to dive a lot deeper on that.